our team, including the latest developments and special reports on the war in Israel, you can subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and click the super thanks button below. The Middle East is currently more volatile than ever, with Iran's proxy forces and their treacherous policies against Israel. But the most important issues in this region are not in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, or southern Lebanon, but in strategic maritime areas such as the Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea. Iran is using these critical areas to field the Houthi rebels and to launch threats and attacks against Israel from the Red Sea. But there is a detail that Tehran has forgotten. There is a very important power that ensures Israel's guarantor status in both the Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea. This power is the United States of America, which has the largest number of Navy members in the world. Since October 7th, the U.S. has deployed its naval forces to these important maritime areas to ensure Israel's security and to prevent Iranian proxy forces from launching missile and drone attacks against Israel through the Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea. In fact, China's move closer to the Red Sea and its drills in this area have pushed the U.S. to increase its naval power, both against Iran and against the militias supporting the Tehran regime. If we take a bird's-eye view of the U.S. naval power in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea, we can see that Iran has no chance in these regions and that the forces under Tehran's command have their hands tied against Israel. The U.S. has now brought such naval power to these strategic maritime areas that Tehran can only watch the U.S. naval buildup in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea, and its efforts to provide Israel with security against Iran's proxy forces in these areas began with the arrival of the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, in the Eastern Mediterranean. This aircraft carrier was later followed by the USS Eisenhower. With these two powerful aircraft carriers, the U.S. sent Iran one of the biggest messages in history. But this was only the tip of the iceberg. Here are all the details of the biggest naval deployment of the century, in which the United States changed the balance in the Middle East and trapped Iran and its proxy militias in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea. We should not start by mentioning that the U.S. is providing Israel with two nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, with air wings the size of an air force, 9 cruisers and destroyers, and an unknown number of submarines for Israel's security in the Middle East. It is obvious that all these massive U.S. naval forces are essentially warning Iran and its proxy militias not to interfere. This is because no such naval power has ever been seen in the Middle East. As for how the U.S. has built such a large naval network in this region, we should talk about how the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower reached the USS Gerald Ford. Following one of the nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower was deployed earlier than planned and crossed the Atlantic Ocean while en route and conducting flight operations. Ike's rendezvous in the Eastern Mediterranean with the USS Gerald R. Ford, one of the world's few larger warships, made headlines, but was only the beginning of the story. Halfway across the Mediterranean, Ike passed the USS Mount Whitney, a command and control ship released from NATO duties to coordinate the massive international armada in the Eastern Mediterranean. These U.S. Navy forces included the French Tonnerre Amphibious Ready Group, which included 2 heavies and 2 escorts. Also in the Adriatic Sea were the 8 ships of the NATO's Permanent Maritime Group 2, consisting of 2 heavies and 6 escorts, commanded by a Royal Navy commander escorting HMS Duncan. The UK's Coastal Response Group was also in the area with 2 ships from the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, which had been there from the start, making plans to evacuate large groups of people if needed. These were not warships, but included a force of Royal Marine Commandos capable of securing the coastal end of any evacuation operation. The United States Navy Support and Naval Supply Commands had 11 other ships, including 5 escorts from 3 different countries, as well as the United Kingdom. In total, There were more than 40 warships, supply ships, and submarines from 13 different countries operating in the waters of the Eastern Mediterranean against Iran and its proxy forces, such as the Houthi rebels. But of these, the Ike Navy force, which Iran and the Houthis fear the most, has been much more prominent in recent days. So why was Iran so afraid of the Ike group and wanted to block this powerful U.S. Navy in the Middle East? Once through the Suez Canal and into the Red Sea, the Ike would encounter two large U.S. amphibious ships, the USS Bataan and the USS Carter Hall, with elements of the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit, 2 U.S. destroyers, and 3 Israeli corvettes. Things were even more interesting here because Ike was now in range of Houthi missiles and drones fired at southern Israel. Iran was quick to exploit this situation and unleashed the Houthi rebels on the U.S. Navy forces. Abdel Malek al-Houthi made it clear that he joined the war when the Houthis fired 4 or 5 cruise missiles and 19 drones from the Red Sea into Israel. The Houthi rebels doubled down on this threatening behavior, saying that our eyes are open to constantly monitor and search for any Israeli vessel in the Red Sea, especially in the Bab el-Mandeb and near Yemen's territorial waters, and fired another drone, this time towards the U.S. destroyer Thomas Hoodner. But the U.S. Navy's Thomas Hoodner shot down the drone, making the Houthis' attack a failure. And following this, Ike and his group have now passed through Bab el-Mandeb without any problems. In other words, Iran's behind-the-scenes activities have failed miserably, and it has been unable to prevent the presence of the U.S. Navy in the Red Sea. In other words, despite the threatening policies of the Iranian-backed Houthis, the U.S. naval forces were able to maneuver as they wished in the Red Sea in support of Israel. Ike and his group did not face any attack or operation by the Houthi rebels while crossing the Red Sea. This probably indicates Tehran's fear of the U.S. policy of increasing its naval presence. On the other hand, in addition to the Ike group and the Marines, the U.S. had an Ohio-class SSGN submarine in the region. This U.S. submarine force carried not only a massive arsenal of Tomahawk cruise missiles, but also a special operations force of Navy SEALs and a mini-submarine to land them if necessary. Such an underwater attack would be very difficult to detect. The Ike Naval Group submarine fleet has minimized the U.S. footprint in the Red Sea. Perhaps the U.S. aircraft carrier accompanying the Ike submarine squadron was just hanging around in case a SEAL covert operation went wrong, or was waiting for the Bab el-Mandeb area to be made safe for transit. This made it easier to ensure Israel's security and intimidate Iran's proxies without revealing the exact coordinates of the U.S. naval presence in the Red Sea and Eastern Mediterranean. Meanwhile, Ike and his group are now reportedly just outside the Straits of Hormuz, the entrance to the Gulf. This deployment will severely reduce the Iranians' ability to interfere with shipping there, which should at least somewhat calm the tense world oil and gas markets. The option is also open for the Ike to continue to the Gulf, making it the first U.S. carrier there in 3 years. This would give the U.S. several options, including moving to extend an air umbrella over recently attacked U.S. bases in Iraq. But what we need to pay attention to in the presence of U.S. naval assets in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea is that, as we have mentioned, the United States is sending a direct message to Tehran with this massive naval force. The exact answer to this message will only be known inside the Pentagon, but the frequency of Houthi missile attacks in the next few weeks may give us a clue. On the other hand, the U.S. Navy's tolerance for being hit is unlikely to be particularly extensive. After several Houthi cruise missile attacks on U.S. warships near Bab el-Mandeb, a U.S. destroyer launched Tomahawks and took out all Houthi radar stations, ending their ability to cause trouble in the region. So it looks like the United States will not tolerate either Iran or its proxy militias.